this is Christiana Gaudet with more answers to your questions about tarot. Before I get started with today's question, I really have to thank you for sending me lots of questions. Now, don't let my saying that discourage you. I have been getting questions on Facebook. I've been getting questions in my regular email box. I've been getting questions in my YouTube inbox. However you want to do it, send me your questions. It may take a couple of weeks, but I will get an answer to you. Now, one thing that's true is I've been really surprised by the variety of questions. I've had questions about tarot decks. I've had questions about reading techniques. I've had questions about card interpretations. And this is a question about professional reading. This question comes to me from Nick. He was inspired to write to me because he watched the video on rephrasing questions and recognized that he and I have a similar reading style, which is terrific. Now, his problem is this. He knows that some readers charge by the question. Obviously, if you're going to rephrase questions and break one question into many questions, as I do and as it appears he does, you can't very well charge by the question, can you? So he charges by time. I do the same thing. What he says is he offers readings at 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and 60 minutes. That's how he does his pricing. And this is what he says. Although I consider myself to be pretty efficient at managing my time, I find it difficult when clients choose shorter readings. Any information would be greatly appreciated. Nick, thank you for your question. And I got to tell you, although I've been a professional tarot reader for 20 years, and I too believe I can be very efficient with my time, you have just struck on what is the most difficult aspect of my job. So the advice I'm going to give you, you have to understand that I struggle with this too, even after 20 years. It's not easy. And I appreciate your asking this question because it really got me thinking about how I might be able to do this better. Now, it's true, some people charge by the question, some people charge by the session, and that is as long as it takes. I think it would be great to have that luxury, but frankly, I don't. And it's important to remember that when people choose shorter readings, sometimes it's because they don't have the money to pay for a larger reading, and sometimes it's because they don't have the time. So they have a limited resource, and don't always assume that it is the money that they're short on. It may be they're short on time. Now, a couple of things that may work for you. When I do a longer reading, a half hour, an hour, I'm very happy starting with an overview, seeing what I see, identifying the specific problems, and then taking the questions and going through. That's how I like to do it. If I'm doing a shorter reading, like a 10-minute reading, a 15-minute reading, I will ask the client if they have a specific question or area of concern. Because in that short period of time, it is very important that you answer the question that's on their mind, and you don't know going into it if that question is going to take 2 seconds or if that question is going to take the whole of the 15 minutes. So it's still okay to do an overview and see what you see, but make sure that you know what their question is and that you address that first. Then if you have extra time, and you might, then you can kind of do a general spread and bring up some other stuff. Now, another thing, especially if they're just looking for a general reading, they just want to know what you see and you have 15 minutes in which to do that. Go ahead and do your general spread, but you have to make the judgment call about what's most important. If you do the same spread, and this is what I do an 11-card Celtic Cross, and I do that whether I'm doing the 10-minute reading, the half-hour reading, or the hour-long reading. That's how I start. And so what's the difference then? How do I do it differently if it's a 10-minute reading or an hour-long reading? With an hour-long reading, I'm going to pull out every point. The points that I think are most important and the points that I don't think are as important. With the shorter reading, what you are looking for is key points. What is most important? And you can even ask your guides as you're doing the reading to show me. Show me what's most important. Have a conversation with your guides and with the guides of your client and say, look, we've got 15 minutes. Show me what I need to see in 15 minutes. And that way you've got all of that spiritual help on your side as well. Now, there are also the clients, and these are the clients who probably don't have or don't want to spend the money, but they really need the longer reading, and they're going to try to stretch you. They're going to burst into tears in the 15th minute of the 15-minute reading, or they're going to bring up their really serious question at the very end. And you know what? Sometimes they're not trying to play you. Sometimes they're embarrassed about the question. They're afraid of the question. And so it comes out at the very end. Now, sometimes as a good reader, you'll see the question in the beginning and you'll avoid all of this. But if you don't, and a lot of times the questions that you don't see are the questions that are burning within them, but in the scheme of things are not that important. And so you may see it, but not understand that this is really what's weighing on them, because on a larger spiritual level, it's something they have anxiety about, but isn't really that big a deal. So when you have the client who tries to stretch you at the end, I have to say, I do let them stretch me a little bit. I try not to, but I'm not going to cut someone off right at the end if they don't have their question answered, and I'm not going to cut someone off if they're in tears. I try not to let them stretch me more than a couple of minutes, and I try to take care of it efficiently. How do you do it efficiently? Limit your words. If you're a good tarot reader, you are loquacious. You are good at talking. And that's great. But measure your words and use only the words that are necessary. Make only the points that are necessary. You have to get good at self-editing. So, how do you handle a shorter reading? Number one, work with the spirits around you. Let them know that this is the goal and ask them to show you what's most important. Number two, even if it's not your typical style to ask the client for a question or an area of focus, in a shorter reading it might be a good idea. Number three, look for the most important points and don't worry about mentioning the things that seem less important. And finally, edit yourself. Make sure that you're editing both content, keeping to what is most important, and that you are editing your number of words so you don't waste time. And of course, the other thing, if the client comes up with something big at the very end, try to handle it quickly, but it is perfectly okay to let the client know that this is a big issue and it's going to take more time. And you can say, you know, I would really like to have the time to address this fully. Do you have the ability to extend our time together, or would you like to make an appointment for later on this week or next week to handle this the way it needs to be handled? It is perfectly okay to do that. I have a real problem with the scam psychics who say at the very end of the reading, oh, I see this terrible thing and we have to talk about it, but your time is up. You know, I don't want to do that. But sometimes legitimately you have to find a way to offer extra time without making it be high sales pressure, understanding that the client may really have limited resources. And I have to say, if you have to go 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes past your end time, just do it. You know, if that's what they need, just do it. I have to say I've received some criticism in my life because I tend to go a little long, but I would rather go long than go short. Nick, I hope you find that helpful. This is a difficult problem. I thank you so very much for your question, and if you have a question about tarot, send me an email. You can also message me on Facebook. You can message me on YouTube. Send me a smoke signal, whatever it takes. I will answer your question.